Welcome back to the Let's Buy a Home podcast. I'm your host, Dan Knott, and in today's episode, we'll be talking about how you guys who are buying a home with a partner can navigate such a big transition together and manage your relationship as homeowners. I have an expert guest here with me today, Samantha of the Relationship Rehab. Samantha, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on.
Perfect. Well, thank you for joining me. I'm very excited to have you on the podcast. Could you please introduce yourself and also the Relationship Rehab?
Absolutely. So my name is Samantha and I'm originally from Wales, but I'm now based in Thailand. I've been living here for about 10 years now. But I am an attachment trauma specialist and relationship coach, and I specialize in supporting individuals to heal attachment trauma wounds and patterns so they can be more attuned and connected not only to other people but to themselves as well. And my background is in social work. So this was when I started to realize, when I was doing this type of work and just observing relationships between partners, between parent and child, and what was at the root cause of a lot of disruption and disconnect with each other. And I started to realize that it really is the way that we attach to one another, the way that we attune, and the attachment style that we adopt from our childhood. So I've been on my own journey as well with healing anxious attachment style, been on an emotional roller coaster in a lot of different type of relationships that have just been phenomenal lessons, have really transformed me personally and professionally. And now I've made it my mission to really support individuals and couples to learn, embody what it's like to be in healthy and secure connection and attunement with each other.
Perfect. Well, yeah, I think it's a really important conversation to have. So I'm 32, myself and lots of friends have navigated the process of buying a home over the last 5 years or so. And yeah, everybody comes through different challenges throughout that process. As well as that, I work with lots of home buyers who have bought a home with partners. And unfortunately, some of those home buyers do come back to me a year or two later, and maybe a relationship has ended. And yeah, you know, home ownership and the struggles that we face can certainly be a contributing factor to that. So I hope this conversation will give people the best chance possible of preparing for the journey and essentially managing any friction. So before we get into it, what are your own personal experiences with when a relationship meets home ownership?
Okay. Well, I'm 35. And my experience in buying a home with a partner was actually at the age of 21. I was very young and we had been together since we were 15. And do you want me to go into some of the challenges yet, or just a brief
Yes, go
overview?
for it.
Okay, perfect. So I feel like the main reason why we bought the home together was because we felt like we should. It was like the next step in our relationship. So I know I was very young back then, but I don't really think age is a factor when it comes to buying a home. Regardless of the age, I think the lessons and the opportunities remain the same. But I was not really in a position where I was able to really question the relationship because of my anxious attachment. I didn't want to go there, didn't want to listen to those niggles, those red flags that this was not the right thing for me. Instead, I wanted to paint the perfect picture of our relationship being the best. And also there was a pressure as well because we were renting. And as we know in the UK, rent is expensive. It's a little bit like throwing money down the drain. But we wanted to buy in order to save money. So our reasons were because we feel like we should and because we felt like we were wasting money. I will say as well that when we bought the home, the deposit that we put down was my money. So he didn't contribute financially to the deposit of the home, which in and of itself is a big giant red flag. So that's one thing to really look at, is how much each person, individual of the couple, contributing financially. And if there's one contributing financially more than the other, really check in with yourself to see if you are genuinely happy about that. For me, I was not. I pretended to be, but deep down I was feeling very resentful. So coupled with the should and the resentfulness that I was feeling, we went and started to look for houses, and I was really pulled into this fantasy, this vision of having my own home. This was exciting. Of course, it's so exciting to have your own home. And I really wanted this vision that I had where our relationship got better as well. I thought our relationship was not amazing. It was okay. I was avoiding a lot of stuff, but I thought if we just had our own home, everything would be better. And I really loved the process of shopping for the home. And then we got the home, and a lot of stuff happened in between. I'm happy to go into it now, or you can ask me a bit later. But unfortunately, 6 months into us buying that home, the relationship broke down. And we'd been together for 7 years at this point.
I understand. I think when you've mentioned pressures there, I think an additional pressure is that we do live in an economy where, for a lot of people, if you do want to buy a home, sometimes you may feel like you have to do it with a partner in order to be able to access mortgages, access deposits, etc. So yes, you did mention some of your own challenges. So what were those challenges, and what would you do differently if you were to do that again?
Hmm. So, like I said, the first challenge was I didn't really listen to myself. Instead, I followed what I should do, and we all subscribe subconsciously, sometimes unconsciously, to this: where should I be on my timeline? And I'm from a small village in Wales, so I feel like that timeline is even more shorter than maybe big cities in England. But you meet your person or your partner, you get a job, you go to uni, whatever that looks like, and then the next step is to have a home together, or children, or marriage. Like, we follow these steps. And I was doing that. But not once did I kind of step away from that and be like, hang on, what is the life that I want to live that is true for myself, that I'm not following other people's expectations? So that was the biggest thing that I did not do, was to check in with myself. Another challenge was financial. I was the breadwinner of the relationship. And another part of the anxious attachment style is sometimes we are pleasers. We want to provide. We have this masculine energy about us sometimes, where we want to take care, we want to nurture, we want to do all this stuff. So I was leading with that energy and the resentfulness that came with it. And the other challenge was that we were so out of balance. We were not aligned at all in the way that we wanted to live our lives. We had completely different goals for our future. We had completely different ways of being. For example, my perfect morning, I'm a morning person, and I had this vision, again, this vision, I really leaned into this vision, where we would wake up together and have coffee and talk about what color we're going to paint the landing, and I just had these beautiful visions, which I deserve. Everybody deserves to have that beautiful vision come to life. But it was not the reality. And I knew it even before we moved in together, because he wouldn't get up before midday. I know we were young, but there's a lot of older adults that are pretty much the same. He would stay up all night. We were totally out of alignment. So this, I feel like when we buy a home with someone, and this doesn't have to be a romantic partner, it can be a friend as well, we really start to see those true colors. We really get challenged in the best possible way, because I feel like buying a home with someone either makes you or breaks you. So what I would do differently was that I would have like a proper period of renting first, personally. If you are unsure, because this is a hell of a commitment, and it took a long time and a lot of money to dissolve the contract between us. And if when I do things differently, because I would like to buy a home again with a partner. I'm currently renting at the moment. That's what I'm doing differently. I'm giving myself a solid rental period to just test it out, to see if we are a compatible match. And I would have those uncomfortable conversations that I was too afraid to have back then, because I was afraid that if I started to have those conversations, that it would not happen, that we would not have that house. And that vision was so strong for me. I ran past through all that. I didn't have those difficult conversations.
Yeah, so I completely agree with everything you're saying. I actually made a post on my Dando's Mortgages social media page recently. I know you've mentioned finances a few times, and that post was 6 awkward financial questions you should ask your partner before buying. I'll run through those now. They were: you should ask your partner, do you have any debts and how much? Do you have any history of adverse credit history? How are we splitting the deposit and the mortgage? How are we splitting the bills? How are we going to cover maintenance costs because the boiler may break? And how will you own the home together? I know that you've mentioned that you maybe contributed more towards the deposit. So there is an option of owning a home as joint tenants, where you both essentially are responsible for 100% of that property, or tenancy in common, where you may have a split. That could be 60-40, 70-30, whatever it may be. So yeah, how much value do you think those conversations hold, and when should you have them?
They're absolutely essential. Absolutely essential. And I didn't know about the split. That's an amazing option. And I unfortunately was cornered where he blackmailed me into, if I didn't put his name on the mortgage, because I didn't want to initially, because I thought this is my money, the deposit. I should have full ownership, no?
Mhm.
But he blackmailed me, and that should have been a giant red flag in and of itself. And he, yeah, manipulated me into that. Anyway, but those conversations need, I believe financial conversations between a couple needs to be had immediately. Like when you decide that, okay, we're going to commit to each other, you're my boyfriend, you're my girlfriend, we're in a serious dating connection or relationship, you need to start having those conversations about finances. And they can start small. They can start with like, how are we going to split the bill when we go for dinner? How are we, when we go on holiday together? Holidays are a great opportunity and challenge for a couple to understand financial spending habits, financial decisions. How are we going to navigate these conversations around money? And we can really start to assess way before we're thinking about buying a house with somebody. But in those moments where the relationship is tested, can we then make our assessments?
Absolutely. I think financial conversations are a little bit of have been a little bit of a taboo in British culture. You know, a lot of the time we wouldn't have been able to ask our parents how much money they earn, things like that. I hope that our generation maybe are opening up the conversation and it's becoming a little bit more natural, hopefully. But yes, I completely agree. As early as possible, start having some very early financial conversations, whether it is splitting the bill, how are we going to pay for this holiday? Are we able to do this together? And yeah, start having those conversations early, because in a lot of households around the UK, the main stresses can be financial stresses. If you didn't know by now, I work as a mortgage advisor helping first-time buyers from around the UK to take their first steps onto the property ladder. If you want to buy your first home, but you're not sure where to start, head over to my Instagram page where you'll find the educational content that you need. As well as that, you'll find testimonials and success stories from my home buyers. Back to the podcast. If two people perhaps are in a relationship and have been for a while, and they may be considering whether or not they are ready to move in together and whether that would be a good idea, how would they know if they are ready? Are there any boxes that you believe they should be ticking before they make that decision?
Hmm. This is such an interesting question because there's no black or white answer to this. Like when will you be ready? And before I get into that, I just also wanted to add upon what you said, Dan, which is, finances is one of the most common reasons for divorce. It's the most common topic of conflict in relationships, and I think that's why it's important we start sooner rather than later. So just wanted to add that in. And if it is uncomfortable, if it is something that, like you said, is taboo, I've never, my parents always shut me down. I don't know how to talk about finances. Maybe a third person, like a counselor or just someone that you trust, can really support you to navigate those conversations. So, how to know if you're ready? And I'm going to base this off of my personal experience where I wish it was in place where I could be like, yes, I'm ready. And just on my professional observations as well. So when to know when you're ready? Let me just take a moment. I think it needs to start with really feeling into, just going back to what I was saying. What are your reasons? What are your motivations? Just checking in with that first and foremost. Are you feeling like this is what you should be doing? Are you trying to keep up with the Joneses? Or is this a genuine, authentic next step in your relationship? And it's okay if it's not. It doesn't have to be that you have to live together. I know many happily married couples or just couples in long-term relationships that have their own houses, have their own spaces. Let's normalize that to begin with, knowing that you have options. And then jumping upon what we just talked about, the financial transparency. Are you aligned in your financial goals, your spending habits? And have you had those difficult conversations? Are you aligned? Because if, one person is a big old spender and the other person is quite frugal, and you're going to now have a home together, that's going to be difficult because he's going to be, or she's going to be spending all the money, and you're going to be having panic attacks that the money is now rapidly leaving the bank account. So how aligned are you financially? How ready are you emotionally? How are you handling stress and challenges together as a couple? Because as we know, buying a home can be stressful. You're going to be navigating big decisions like remortgaging, or do we get the kitchen redone, and all these decisions that you have to make. So how ready are you? How emotionally available are you for each other in the relationship to have those big conversations? Are you equal partners, or does one of you tend to take the lead? This is all very vital information for you to know when you're making important decisions around the house. And I think the long-term vision, it needs to be aligned as well. Have you had those conversations with each other about whether you want children? That's a big one, right? If one doesn't want to have children and the other one doesn't, that's something for us to acknowledge and be aware of. Are you aligned in your shared goals? What you want to do with your lives? Are you on the same path? Are you buying the house, for mutual reasons and motivation? Is one of you feeling maybe a little bit pressured or guilty or whatever? You want to both be so sure that you're ready to take this next step, this commitment with each other. And I think lastly, and I know this is not the most romantic idea, but it's realistic, especially, thinking upon my journey and how difficult it was to get his name off the contract of the house, is are you mature enough to have a conversation about how you're going to navigate the possibility, and it's a big old if, the relationship does break down? How are you going to handle it? What happens if we break up? And if that person unfortunately doesn't have the emotional maturity to understand the essentialism of that question, of that conversation, then again, just information for us to have.
Yeah, I think you touched on some amazing points there. Talking about goals other than just home ownership, as you mentioned, children as an example, career, relocation in the future. These are all conversations that you should be having. And you did mention managing other stresses. How are you managing other stresses together? Because buying a home together is a bit of an emotional roller coaster, and there will be stresses, there will be challenges. That is a little bit inevitable. And it's important to remember that the decision you make today doesn't have to be forever. Just because you are not ready now does not mean that you won't be ready together in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Absolutely take your time with it. Just to use myself as an example, I bought my first home when I was 27 with my partner, who at the time I'd been with for around about 5 years. And she was ready before me, essentially. And she wanted to buy a home. And I maybe wasn't quite ready. And she would ask me, why aren't you ready? And there was no big reason. It was just in my life at that time. I had quite a good thing going at home, to be honest, living with parents. And it didn't seem like a necessary step in my life just yet. And I used to say to her, I will be ready at some point, but just not yet. And then around about a year later, I woke up one morning and we just felt ready. And I felt ready to make the move. And I was very happy that I didn't rush into it. And then we bought our first home, went on to our second home. But yeah, I'm very glad that we decided to wait a little bit until we were both on the same page. And yeah, it's, we're still here now. Okay, so it's going all right so far. Perfect.
I just want to add a little bit to that, Dan, because yes, it's beautiful that you shared that. And I think if this is you, if this is happening in your relationship where you or your partner feels more ready than the other, I think it's important to not take it personally if that person says that they're not ready. It's not about you, not about them. It's just where they're at in their life. Like you said, Dan, it's their decision based off what they need and what they feel like is right for them. It's not a reflection on you or the relationship.
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, now let's move on to when people own a home together. Okay, so they've applied for the mortgage, they've got their hands on the keys, and they're now going to share a space, finances, and perhaps and hopefully a life together. So let's start on a positive note. Can home ownership strengthen relationships?
Absolutely. 100%. Oh my gosh, having a home with a partner when it's aligned is the most exciting thing. It's so exciting and it's so wonderful. It's a big commitment to each other. And that in and of itself, making that aligned, genuine decision to be homeowners together really does deepen and strengthen the relationship. But what I will say is buying a home in and of itself, just like having a baby, doesn't strengthen the relationship itself. It reflects the foundations you've already built with each other. So when you make this commitment, it's strengthening what's already been built. So yes, absolutely, it can strengthen and deepen a relationship and really bring two people together in a shared vision, in a shared life. There's nothing more beautiful than that. And what a expansion you can experience when that should so happen. And it gives you that beautiful sense of stability, that you're doing life with somebody, that someone's got your back, that you can come home to somebody and tell them about your day. And yeah, it's just such a wonderful experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that home ownership, when it is right, can lay the foundations for success and happiness in other areas too. Are there areas where people should expect to compromise? Do you have to be willing to give up certain habits, rules, or behaviors in order to make the best of it?
Yeah, so this is another thing about, being homeowners together as well when it comes to strengthening in the relationship, because there's going to be challenges, there's going to be conflict. And as we know, with conflict, it either drives you apart or drives you closer together. So home ownership just gives you even more opportunities to do that. In terms of compromising, of course, there's always going to be compromise. But what compromise means is meeting each other in the middle, understanding that you are sharing a space with somebody, another human being that's not like you. They are going to have their own habits and quirks and things that may not be aligned with you. You may not share the same excitement about 11 p.m. football. You may want to go to bed. So there's going to be like differences. What compromise isn't is compromising yourself, losing yourself. So what I observed in my own personal story was that I wanted to hold on to this vision so much, I completely lost myself. And I was scared. I made this massive decision, a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort, and I didn't want to think that we were not making it work. So I compromised myself. I went along with what he wanted. So of course there's always going to be compromise, but just to know if you are already coming together and meeting each other in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to remember as well that a certain level of, disagreement or conversation, that is natural, whether that is leaving the dishes out or whatever it might be, you will face conversations such as that. I have a friend who bought a home with a partner, and this is now something we can sort of laugh about. But yeah, unfortunately, it didn't go well. But one of the conversations he was having, or disagreements, was regarding when dishes would be put into the dishwasher. And this is an example of something that can maybe build up. That may seem sort of simplistic, but it can build up if we aren't both on the same page and maybe respecting each other's rules or certain levels of compromise, and yeah, trying our best in those areas.
And coming from it from a psychological point of view, there, when we come across these what we think are small things, right, like dishes being left in the sink and not being washed, or laundry being thrown all over the floor rather than in the basket, and we see it a lot in married couples or cohabiting couples where nagging starts to come into it, and we're picking at each other and we're bickering and we're nagging. But it's never about the dishes. It's never about the laundry. What's going on underneath all of that? And it could be that you don't feel respected. It could be that you don't feel understood. That, my partner right now, he is a bit of a clean freak, but he's messy. So he likes things clean, but everything's just messy. Me, I like things clean and organized. Now, when we first started dating and I went into his apartment and it was messy, I'm like, oh no, I cannot. I cannot date this person. They're so messy. But instead of just writing him off, I had those conversations. And it's the same when you're owning a home of, I like things to have their own space. I like things neat and tidy and organized. This is just how I am. But I know that he has his own business. He values his time over sorting out the sock drawer. So how can I come to a mutual understanding with him of like, okay, I cannot now go ahead and start demanding that things are done my way, and he cannot go ahead and demand that things are done his way. Instead, we need to meet each other in the middle and say, okay. And I've had friends that really struggle to do this, and the way that they were able to solve this is that they had their own spaces. He had his, let's call it a man cave, where he could do what he likes in there. It could be as messy as he wants in there. And she had her own little personal sanctuary in the home as well, where she had things her way. So if we're really struggling to do all these things together, can we have our own spaces? And then those mutual spaces, there is just a level of respect for one another, and the house rules are kept to. We've had those conversations, and about boundaries as well. That's another important conversation to have before or during cohabitation is, what are your boundaries? What are my boundaries? Because a lot of us like our own space and privacy. How are we going to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the overarching message will always be conversations.
Oh, and communication.
Communication, yes. As I've now lived with my partner for around about 6 years, and we now sort of have our boundaries and our jobs within the household sort of set out. Although it's not documented, we do have an agreement on what we do in the household. It's not written down on a piece of paper, but she wouldn't know what day of bin day is. And I've never ordered an online food shop. But we have that agreement there, and then that saves saves on conversation. It saves on having to have any sort of friction in those areas. So yeah, Samantha, thank you very much for coming onto the Let's Buy a Home podcast. Is there anything else that you feel is important for couples to know before they do make that big decision and buy a home together?
I think just echoing what you said earlier, Dan, which really resonated, which is, this isn't a permanent decision. So even if you are in a space where you just don't know, where you're listening to this episode and you're like, okay, I hear you, but I don't know. And we are renting and it seems fine. And maybe you do need to take that next step in order to know. But just know it's not permanent. And you always can retract your decision, even in the mortgage process. You always have choice. And I think it's important to empower ourselves and reassure and remind that we always have choice. And so does that other person as well. So buying a house, buying a home together absolutely can strengthen, deepen your connection in the most beautiful, gorgeous way. But it can also be very challenging and confrontational. A lot of our trauma is going to come up to the surface. And that in and of itself is just the most beautiful opportunity for ourselves, not just for the relationship, but for the individual as well. I wouldn't change anything about my story. Yeah, I may have lost a lot of money and stress, but I wouldn't change that experience. It taught me a lot about myself, and I am the person I am today because of that. And it doesn't put me off doing it again. I've learned, which is amazing. Every challenge we come up against in life are lessons and opportunities for us to learn. So I want people to know, if you are in this space of making a decision and asking yourself these very important questions and maybe having those conversations, just know that you can take your time. Just know that you can always change your mind. And just know that the relationship you have with yourself and how attuned you are with your boundaries, your needs, your communication style, your trauma that may come up and sabotage or influence you, then that is a really great starting point.
I think that is an amazing way to end. So thank you very much for your insight, your expertise, and for your opinions. Thank you very much for joining me. Where can our listeners find you online?
I hang out a lot on Instagram, so you can find me at the.relationship.rehab on Instagram. I also have my website, samireedcoaching.com. That's SAMI, reedcoaching.com. I have a lot of resources. I have a relationship archetype quiz if you want to know what attachment style you are. All of that can be found on the website, along with my coaching programs and one-on-one practice as well.
Perfect. So yes, listeners, please do make use of Sami's expertise. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've all found value in this conversation, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.